Imagine never being afraid to share your thoughts and ideas with others, your peers, your teachers, or even your boss. In times of stress, when we need most to communicate effectively to be understood, it can feel like our words abandon us. And how might that feel for a child trying to make sense of learning? We all have that one common shared experience of once being a child. And today I will share with you my own experience as a child going to school, working in schools, and ultimately creating a new solution for children to learn. Now, most of us come into this world kicking and screaming and have no problem getting the things that we need or want. What happens along the way? How do we lose that way? Are these natural rites of passage or something that happens in our experience of school? School has had a magnetic hold on my own life. I've spent 31 years in schools, and as a child, over time, I became a little afraid to share my ideas because I didn't want to give the wrong idea. And more often than not, the questions that were asked of me didn't fit the way that I thought about things. But I learned how to follow the rules and the expectations. And every day, I would go to school, hang up my jacket, hang up my backpack, go to my desk, pull out my book, write down the date, and I would wonder, teacher, do you see me? As adults, we know that teachers can see their students all day long. But when you're a child, it's easy to feel lost and invisible and seek just a moment of recognition in your teacher's eyes. Now I'm going to take you back to a day in 1984. I loved school. I loved my teachers. I recognized that these were humans that could have been anything that they wanted to be, but they were here helping me learn, and I was grateful. On this day in 1984, our teacher had given us an assignment. She asked, "What do you know about grasshoppers?" And the twist was we had to write in cursive writing. When I returned to my desk and looked at this blank page, I envisioned my words in cursive. And to me, it looked like they'd be bowing to the reader. And I didn't want my words to bow. I wanted my words to stand up tall and be proud and happy. Then I envisioned writing in cursive straight up and down. And I recognized that some words would stand, or some letters would stand taller than others. And I didn't want that either. I wanted my letters to feel equal. How was I going to solve this problem? I decided to turn my cursive in the complete opposite direction. And I wrote out the first line, my letters slanting backwards. And to me, it looked like a party. These words were limboing onto the page. They looked happy and joyful. I felt happy inside. I committed to this style of writing all the way through. Handed in my assignment. And a few days later, our teacher called us to the front of the classroom. We sat in rows in front of her. What I remember is she was in a real hurry to hand out these papers. But when she got to mine, she paused. And a million thoughts went through my mind. What is she going to say? Will she tell everybody how neat my writing was? Will she tell us how much she enjoyed reading my work? Well, I saw her lift the paper, and at the same time, her eyebrows started to bunch together. She said, "This is the most bizarre writing I've ever seen," and handed it to the person in front of me. Before I can even get my paper, that paper was taken out of that person's arms. And now my paper was going left to right, and there was laughter and wide-eyed curiosity. I had no words. My paper had turned into a fallen kite, getting tangled up in trees, in the branches of the arms that were my peers. The teacher never asked me why, but I don't think I would have even been able to explain why in that moment. And I wasn't willing to cry. I didn't want to be that kid that cried at school. But if I had cried, my teacher would have known something was wrong. How can we expect our teachers to know something is wrong when the child isn't willing to indicate? This is what I hoped my thoughts and ideas could do. And this is what happened. I closed down that path, the one that was most familiar in my mind, the one that allowed me to be imaginative and free. I realized this is going to get me in trouble, and I didn't want to get in trouble. Now, I did all right in schools. I followed the directions. I kept up with the expectations. The teachers consistently reported that I was a polite, kind, thoughtful child. I had a loving and supportive family, and I had a best friend that understood me, even when I had no words. But ultimately, I wanted to understand what made humans thrive. So after I graduated high school, I went off to university, and I learned about Piaget. Piaget was a scientist, biologist, and psychologist, and he said something that was just so painfully obvious, but a real eye-opener at that time. Kids think differently. It's not that they're not able to think, they just go about it in a different way. This was something that really hit home for me. He also said that the fundamental purpose of schools was to create men and women that could create new things, not merely repeat what had been done in generations before. He also advised that with play is how anything new comes about. So after I finished university, I ended up right back in schools again, and I paid really close attention. My first assignment was as an urgent interventionist, which was a 6-week problem-solving assignment, which turned into a 14-year stay. And during those years, I paid careful and close attention to how a child arrived at school, how they received their worksheets, how they did or did not answer the questions. And I looked to see if those eyes reflected hope, despair, or indifference. If my algebra teacher had told me life was going to be all about solving the unknown variables, I might have paid closer attention during class. But as it was, what he was teaching, I couldn't make much sense of, which meant that I didn't know where to put it in my brain. But during my time in the schools, I realized that there's something about school that seems really unfair to a developing child. What is it? It's hard to pinpoint, but something about the system doesn't seem fair. And I began to pay closer attention to the whys. When a child asks, why do I have to learn this? It's because they're trying to figure something out. Something's not coming together for them. When a child asks why, and that why is met with because, they're not able to make the connection. So I listened for those whys. I tried to understand what is it that the kids aren't getting, and how could I help? How could I minimize that impact? Knowledge which is acquired under compulsion obtains no hold on the mind. Plato. I recognize that the issues surrounding schools are complex, and there are dedicated, caring, committed humans all around the world working to try and solve this. The solution I'm putting forward is based on 4 truths. 1, you can't force learning. 2, nor can you demand someone's attention and expect to sustain it. 3, a child that has not known respect has none to spare. 4, this thing inside the child's brain, or inside the child's head, the brain, belongs to the child. And if we want children to develop a good relationship with their brain, which will impact what they think they can and can't do in life, we need to help them understand some things that aren't so transparent in schools. If the ultimate goal of life is to get to problem solving, then we need to understand how ideas and inspiration work. We need to see how ideas and inspiration affect communication. And we need to understand the role emotions play in all of this. And also we need to understand learning. Not everybody learns the same way. So conversation creates transparency. Conversation makes the children part of the dialogue that shapes their experience of school. They are given the tools and the concepts. They get to play with it. They get to work it out themselves. They put it together. They break it apart. They help each other understand. These characters from my imagination have names: joy, compassion, and creativity. Conversation is the peaceful exchange of thoughts and ideas. Now, over this past spring, we did some prototype testing in different classrooms and schools across Vancouver, different grade levels as well. The day the results started coming in, I gave myself permission to cry because it worked. Not only did we meet our objectives, in the eyes of the children, we had exceeded our objectives, purpose, and value. Our objective was to help children learn how to communicate their ideas in a way that others would understand and give them confidence, and vice versa. How they could take in other people's ideas. 96.8% of the children felt that we met the objective. They were able to communicate their ideas with greater clarity. 87.1% of the children said yes. They had developed a better understanding of themselves, their peers, and their teachers. And 96.8% of the children felt that all schools should have conversation. We were filling a gap. We were giving the kids something that they didn't have before. Now, this was the very first class to kick off the testing, the prototype test. Mrs. McClanahan's class is a grade 4-5 class. And I got to spend some extra time with them because they were also the first ones to finish. I ran a hypothetical scenario past the children because I wanted to really understand what the value was for them. I asked, what if only 50% of schools got conversation? What would happen? They looked at me perplexed, like, how can you even do that? But ultimately, they were able to give me some answers. And one student said, I think that the children that didn't get conversation, they'd just be too stressed out to learn anything. And another offered, the ones who didn't get conversation, well, they'd just be lost in life. And a third one said, the ones who didn't get conversation, they wouldn't keep it a secret from others. They'd share it. I believe children carry within them a set of wishes, and these wishes turn into ideas, and these ideas over time guide their actions, not always obvious to the observer. These wishes are so beautiful, but sometimes can't yet be explained. And some of these wishes, if you knew, would break your heart. I see you. You matter. I see you. You matter. I see you. You matter. This is how the conversation begins. The human in me sees the human in you. Most of my life, I've kept my thoughts and ideas to myself. But once you leap and land on the other side of what's possible for children, for education, for humanity, you realize that taking the leap was never optional. Everything in life was leading you towards it. And it takes courage to jump into the unknown. Others won't understand it. Because sometimes what comes across as bizarre is a beautiful idea waiting to blossom. Let's work together to take the fear out of learning. Thank you. Thank you.